Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to this week's episode of the Sky Sports F1 podcast with me, Matt Baker. Joining me to reflect on an emotional win for Charles Leclerc in Monaco, we've got our very own Bernie Collins, as well as the only man we could possibly get on for a Charles Leclerc win. It's Matt Gallagher. Hi to both of you. Matt, I saw on your Instagram feed that you were with Charles, no less, at the start of the week. What did you say to him?
Well, I would never. I thought, for some reason, and to be fair, it's most weeks, but this one in particular, I thought he was going to win. So I didn't want to say anything to him.
Right.
You know, I was at an event for the new F1 game. You know, of course, said hello, caught up with him, but I was not going to be like, "So you're going to win Monaco?" Because I don't want to be that guy if he then retires. Which, of course, the Monaco curse was something we very much thought was a real thing. But thankfully, for his sake, it no longer.
So the key is nothing. Just don't say anything about the win.
Don't say anything. No jinxing. Yeah.
Easy. Well, whatever you did, it clearly worked very well. Bernie, how are you? How was your weekend?
Good, thank you. I'm a little bit under the weather, but we're getting there now. So apologies for the voice. But yeah, good to be chatting. And yeah, what a great win for Charles. Good to finally have that happen.
Yeah, incredible. We should also say, Bernie, you've got some builders in the background. So if you do hear some soaring, it's not
all
us.
under control. All under control.
It's all under control. Look, let's kick off with our what I've learned from this weekend. Something we've learnt in Formula One. Bernie, why don't you kick us off?
Well, I was going to start with one serious one and one not so serious one. So the serious one being Red Bull not as robust as we thought they were. You know, out of the last three races, it's getting much closer when you look at the championships compared to expectation. And secondly, even Monaco's not fun when you're sick. Those are my two lessons.
Yeah, you had a trip to the French pharmacy, didn't you? You were telling me.
Yeah, some French drugs. There was a lot of, French to English translation going on, but we got there.
We got there. You're out the other side, hopefully. Yeah, very good. Matt, what did you learn this week in Formula One?
I've learnt it's possible to have a race that, even as a full Formula One hardcore Charles Leclerc fan, that you could potentially fall asleep to, because Monaco very much is hard as it is, right? It's difficult. There's not many overtakes, and then it went no red flag, no stops. It was a glorified free practice 4 in a lot of ways, but it's fine. We had a great result at the end. Lots to talk about, but yes, I think Monaco nowadays we need to talk about what potentially could change.
Well, we are fortunately going to actually discuss that a little bit later on in the podcast. I learned that Charles Leclerc. What do you think you would eat the night before a Formula One race? What possibly could you put in your stomach that will fuel you for a mentally challenging race, for a physically challenging race? You might think all these healthy foods, but no, pizza was what Charles Leclerc, it revealed, is what he ate. He said he got home too late on Saturday night, so couldn't cook. Questions arise here of, does he cook his own meals during a race weekend? I don't know. Seemingly he does. And that he said he just ordered his favourite pizza, which we found out was a margarita with prosciutto. So all Charles fans there, a few easy way to his heart, I guess. Just get him a pizza with prosciutto and margarita.
I guess that's part of it, though, Matt. This is an unusual race for him in that he was at home. So all the normal, what he does, going back to the hotel, how he's transported around is all different in Monaco for all the drivers, but particular when you're able to stay at home.
Yeah, and we saw that photo of him on his bike after winning the Monaco Grand Prix, cycling home was just brilliant. So yeah, look, huge win for Charles, and fueled by pizza, clearly did the right thing. So look, let's get into that win. He's come close a few times in Monaco, hasn't he? You alluded to it earlier, Matt, the Monaco curse. But finally, he was able to get the job done. Matt, I just wonder from your perspective, if you could just try and articulate why this was such a special win for Charles, why he was so emotional, why he even said it was a more significant win than the Monza win a few years back for Ferrari.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as simple as the fact it's his home streets. He grew up there. Of course, his father passed just before he became a Formula One driver, and I'm sure that there are a lot of dreams and wishes that they spoke about that was around Monaco. So, of course, it's not just the Monaco Grand Prix, which is the one everyone wants to win, but it's his home race. And I think as well, through all of the disappointment, it made the win even sweeter. I think probably Daniel Ricciardo can sort of link to that somehow, how he had a few occasions that didn't go his way. And so I feel as though that, again, added to the emotion. Of course, he mentioned as well that his friends, his family, everyone was around Monaco. It's just, I mean, the amount of pressure he must have felt. You heard him over the team radio afterwards, like quite literally crying down the radio. You could hear the emotion. And that's what I live for as a Formula One fan, to see that, to hear that. And, no disrespect to Max Verstappen that's winning most weeks, but you kind of lose that special element. But we've had it with Lando, and now we've had it with Charles. And yeah, it was just, things fell his way, which I'm sure also made him quite emotional and happy that Monaco was kind to him. Like Lance Stroll had a puncture and he delivered his tyre into the pit lane. It's things like that if there was a Monaco curse, it probably would have ended up in the middle of the track and they would have had a safety car and everything would have changed. So, I think it was a release more than anything, because it just was probably weighing him down for a few years.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Bernie, he said something quite interesting after the race, that he said, as a driver, you never really know when your next opportunity to win will be, especially when it's your home race. And I guess it's all very well having those couple of years where it hasn't gone well for him. There is a world in which, Carlos Sainz stays as a Ferrari driver, and then Charles has to go to another team, and then he never gets another opportunity to win his home race again. And I guess it just puts it into perspective, doesn't it, that these are really special moments for drivers.
Yeah, and I think particularly a street circuit somewhere like Monaco, of the podiums I've done, the Monaco one stands out, that podium celebration, how it is. And, I've got no connection to Monaco, so at the end to be your home race, it's got to stand out even more than that as well. So, but as well as that, Monaco, anything can happen. So even if he's in the fastest car next year as the fastest driver, there's still a good chance of you not winning Monaco, because something goes wrong in qualifying or something goes wrong in the race. So particularly at Monaco, all the stars need to align. And you can look at the race and say he was lucky, but equally he did a very clean job in qualifying. And that's where Monaco was won. He put the sectors together. He stayed calm through every session. And, we didn't have the years before where he had clipped the wall and then that put his race at risk. So he did what he needed to do in qualifying to make sure he was on that P1 position. And that's where his race was won. It's, it's not the management of the race, really, I think.
From my perspective, what I've really enjoyed over the last couple of races with Lando winning in Miami and Charles winning this week, it felt like they're really enjoying the moment in a way that perhaps in sport we're so used to seeing sports people go, no, it's all about the next race now. I'm not, they don't really seem to enjoy that win that much. But we saw it with Lando, we saw it with Charles. They seemed elated and speaking about how they were going to party that night. It's actually quite charming, isn't it, to see, and quite nice for fans, I think, to see that side of drivers.
Yeah, it's that human element, especially with Charles and with Lando over lockdown, and they were streaming, and we kind of felt like we were connected to the drivers somewhat, because years ago, Formula One drivers were behind this sort of veil and we didn't really know what they were like. But now they're a lot more personable, and for Charles and Lando, of course, the younger side of the drivers on the grid, it's refreshing to see that side of things. Him, Charles on the radio saying, "Get ready, Jimmies, we're going to have a night out," and things like that. And you're like, oh, they are just normal human beings. So yeah, it felt for Charles like it was his first win as well, through the things we've just spoken about and the emotion there. And this is what we love to see, is the storylines and things like that coming together for drivers that are so likeable up and down the paddock, and probably two of the biggest drivers, Lando and Charles, in terms of popularity as well amongst fans.
Bernie, what have you made of Fred Vasseur's impact? And clearly there's a lot of warmth, isn't there, between Charles and Fred, seeing those pictures of them jumping in the water together. He seems to have really invigorated that Ferrari team to not be making the mistakes perhaps they have done of years gone by. Yeah,
so I think Fred was pushed, but yeah, to see them going in the water together is good. But Fred has brought a lot to that team, I think, and there was a really telling interview, I think, that we did over the Japanese Grand Prix, where he said it's not about what he's doing, it's about everyone in the pit wall feeling comfortable to do their own job. And I think that's what's been lacking in Ferrari. That's what I thought was lacking in Ferrari. And then Fred sort of, put concrete words to that. In fact, saying, it's about making sure everyone's got what they need to do their job correctly, to make the decisions quickly. And, we've seen this year much more aggressive strategy from Ferrari than we've seen in the past. And much clearer decisions. And I think that, through this qualifying even has led to them being in this position of strength, and they just seem to be growing. The team seems more confident, the drivers seem more confident in the radio, so hopefully that continues. And we have to put a large bit of that at Fred's tour, and you can see him in the paddock. He's relaxed on the grid. He's one of the easiest people to interview. He's just so chilled out, and he seems to be spreading that through the team. And a team that's confident like that and growing will do really well.
Smiliest team principal, Matt?
Definitely one of the most likable.
Yeah.
I was chatting with Tommy on our podcast after the race and how it's weird that Ferrari's kind of gone from everyone loves Ferrari but they always have that allure about them. And I feel like Fred has taken down some of those walls, and Ferrari are almost becoming a little bit like McLaren in the sense of a bit fun and likable. And I like that. Fred is bringing that relaxed atmosphere. And I will also say that, the small changes he's making are paying huge dividends. You think that Charles hasn't finished any lower than 4th. Carlos hasn't finished any lower than 5th this year. They're, less than a race win, Ferrari, behind Red Bull in the constructors. They are efficient at the moment. Charles' team radio engineer now changing to a new one, and the changes in communication. And you might think it's a small thing, but it definitely pays you back. The fact that it's gone from we are checking to we already know, Charles, like we're all good. Like we've got this in hand. We're not interested in this. Just focus on the job. And yeah, I couldn't praise Fred higher for what he's done in the small amount of time that he's been team principal, because he can't make changes from day one, but we're starting to see that now sort of drip into, his leadership style.
It just occurred to me that his race engineer, the new race engineer, has got a 1-2 record of wins. That's pretty significant, isn't it? That's incredible.
That's taking the numbers to suit the answer he wants, isn't it?
Yeah. He needs. Yeah. I'm sure it will go down as the season progresses, unless Charles goes on to an incredible run. Matt, you mentioned it there about the points difference of where we are after the Monaco Grand Prix. So I've got here 31 points between Max and Charles. Just 24 points now in the Constructors' Championship. So Bernie, is it fair to say that we do have a potential title fight on our hand this season?
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess like a lot of people had sort of thought, in the head without looking at the numbers, Max is running away with it again. He's, won the vast majority of the beginning of the season. And then when you look at the numbers post-Monaco, suddenly it's like, well, actually, 8 races in, it's a lot closer battle than we've ever had. Red Bull have genuinely lost Monaco. The last 2 races, McLaren have been right there with them. Obviously McLaren have won 1 and Red Bull have won 1. But it is going to be a much tighter fight. And Red Bull don't seem that confident going forward. And that's really exciting for us watching at home. A part of that parcel is the fact that Ferrari have 2 guys regularly very close together on track and regularly taking good points. And those types of things will stand them instead for the rest of the year. And that's where Red Bull really need to sort of, start questioning things a little bit, because the car is still the fastest car on most tracks is still the fastest car. Appreciate not around Monaco. And we've got a lot of questions to ask as a development year. The vast majority of the year is ahead of us. If McLaren and Red Bull continue to improve, or if McLaren and Ferrari continue to improve, then Red Bull are in trouble.
When you cast your mind back, Matt, to the first 4 or 5 races, got the gaps here from Verstappen to Perez. So 22 seconds in Bahrain, 13 seconds in Saudi Arabia, obviously DNF in Australia, 12 seconds to Perez in Japan. It's almost a bit of, we've almost kind of gone in 2 different halves, haven't we, of this first bit of the season. There was the bit where it just looked like Max was going to win everything, and we were in for, with all respect to the Max and the domination that we've seen from him, a fairly long season. Now it's quite exciting, just on the basis of that.
It is. I mean, my expectations and most fans' expectations were, right, this is going to be a Verstappen 24-win World Tour that we're going to see in 2024. We were very convinced that Red Bull were just going to dominate. And now, as Bernie says, you look at the championship standings, you go, well, hold on. We're 1 DNF away from very, very close. And of course, that 1 Max DNF has shifted things a little bit closer. But it's fascinating. You think, okay, Red Bull don't suit Monaco. But you actually look, Red Bull have not had a very good month. You have Miami, Imola, and Monaco, and they've looked beatable in all 3 of them. And then you think, okay, well, when we go to more traditional tracks, maybe they'll be better. But you also wonder, okay, well, if they haven't suited the last 3, which are all very different tracks, how many are they going to suit between now and the end of the season? And of course, McLaren brought a whole host of upgrades, Ferrari as well. I've read today that if Red Bull have one more big incident, they might have to cancel an upgrade later down the line. There's plenty of things that could go wrong here. Because, I mean, Perez's crash cost them millions, I think. So there's lots of little factors that could genuinely, and I'm not trying to say this just to hype up the season, because I'm in absolute bewilderment that we're even talking about a potential championship fight. But I still think it's in Max's hands. What I will say is that I actually believe McLaren are going to be stronger over the rest of the year. I kind of wrote them off a little bit into Monaco, thinking, it's not going to suit their car. It's slower speed corners. It's going to be Ferrari. But they were right there again. And then you wonder, okay, are McLaren going to be there every single week? But Lando's a little bit further back. So plenty to play for. And as you can tell, I'm quite excited.
Yeah, it is really exciting. Bernie, when we're talking about these tracks that suit and don't suit the likes of Red Bull, is there one track on the calendar that you would say that is a sort of bog standard Formula One track? If you're fast there, you're kind of fast anywhere. Would that be fair to say?
Well, I think the track that everyone looks to, the baseline track, is Barcelona, which is obviously only 2 races away. That's a test because there's a good variety of corners there, if you like. Maybe not so much now that we've got rid of the sort of final chicane, but there's a good variety of corners there, and that's the one that people will look at. Canada that's coming up is very much all about straight line speed, which we know Red Bull should be dominant in. The interesting thing with what Matt said there about you expect a McLaren to progress more is McLaren, Piastri should have beaten Charles Leclerc in qualifying in Monaco. He had 3 better sectors if he put them together. A few mistakes in each lap just meant that he wasn't on pole and he was P2. And the race would have looked, we would have been having a very different conversation there. But Charles did the job and got the 3 sectors together and beat Piastri in that way. So I think that the big worry for Red Bull is they started the year with this very different concept car to what we'd seen before, and we were all a bit surprised that they'd changed the car in any way, given how strong the car had been, more to like the Mercedes style. And now we're starting to hear little things like, we're not quite got the correlation right, or we're not quite getting upgrades working as expected. All these little things with a different concept car are not guaranteed. I seen the different concept, I thought, that's a risk. And then you see race 1 and you think, they've nailed it again. I was absolutely getting my hopes up seeing a different car that was incorrect. And now we're starting to see that actually maybe they are struggling to put those upgrades on. And that might be maybe an overly optimistic or whatever, but there's small signs that they're not as comfortable as they were, for sure.
Is that, Matt, though, perhaps down to the pressure that they're now under in the sense of, I guess, there are other teams catching them now, so they're not going to have it all their own way. They're going to have to start making decisions more under pressure, which I guess then is a true test, isn't it, of a Formula One team of which direction they go.
Yeah, it's weird the things that have come out about the Red Bull philosophy, and sort of more recently about the fact that they actually have realised that the ceiling to their development is a lot lower than perhaps they had originally thought, and it kind of is testament to what we've seen in Bahrain. They were so clear. But the other teams are catching up. I wouldn't probably say it's down to pressure. I think it's more the internal carnage that is going on in Red Bull at the moment. Adrian Newey leaving. There's lots of unsettling things which won't affect potentially when it first came out because the car's good. But as you carry on throughout the season and you've got a lot of uncertainty, then I'm sure there are going to be, added pressure that way. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to see what the other teams can bring. But it's Ferrari and McLaren. You cannot underestimate them. I think the one thing for Red Bull that is a bit of a settling factor is that Max Verstappen does not feel pressure. The bloke will do an iRacing race at the same weekend as Imola. It will perform to what that car can bring, but the car isn't giving him that advantage that we saw at the start of the season.
Bernie, just the final thing on this perhaps is just the comments from Max across the weekend about his ride, not being able to ride the curbs in a way that some of perhaps the Ferrari or the McLaren looks a lot more comfortable doing so. How big an issue do you think that could be in the races going forward?
I think as we move away from street circuits, then that should get better. So, the whole aero platform, the philosophy, the Red Bull is very much prioritise aero, mechanical sympathy comes second. That's always been the way that they've had the best aero performing car. Now, on a flat, smooth surface, high-speed corners, that's easy to achieve. On a bumpy track, a street track, a track with very aggressive curbs, much, much more difficult to achieve. So, Canada can be quite bumpy, I think, at times. So there is potential, there is potential there because it is a temporary track surface, really. Barcelona should be a lot better. So we'll have a mix, but anything that's sort of a street track or where there's that sort of unsettled will be a struggle. Now, there is more margin in those other ones. There is more margin in Canada to sort of have slightly different line or whatever. And there's not that. The problem with Monaco is there's no margin. The wall is right there. So if you don't feel confident in the car and you're taking any sort of extra margin because of bumps or unsettled, then you're losing lap time. Whereas the tracks where the walls aren't so close, then you can potentially start to explore the limits a little bit more.
Fascinating. It's going to be very, very interesting. I guess kind of what we were saying earlier, we sort of keep waiting for this ultimate track where we're really going to see a fair performance of the Red Bull. But yeah, we've had 3 very different tracks. We seem to have a much tighter field now, which as we keep saying is very, very exciting for us in Formula One. All right, I want to get into talking about Monaco as a race, and there's been, certainly it feels after this race this year, the most discussion I've seen in many years about the future of Monaco as a race and it's standing now in the calendar in 2024, 25 going forward. Matt, you said in your bit at the top that you, as an ardent Formula One fan, even you were slightly tested on Sunday with that race. Few stats here. The top 10 finished in their grid order. That's the most in Formula One history. The most before that was only 6, and there were no overtakes in the top 10 for the entire 77 laps of the Grand Prix. Of course, there was a mitigating factor of the red flag, and the red flag meant that tyres were changed, and because tyres were changed, it meant we didn't see the strategy play out as it would have done without the red flag. But Matt, I'll come to you on this first. Do you still think Monaco is a race that we should be keeping on the Formula One calendar?
Yes. Monaco deserves to be on the Formula One calendar, but I will say that Formula One can't just leave it and be happy with what it is. There has to be some kind of changes. Of course, you can't really change Monaco as a track. I think that the last corner definitely could be a little bit altered, because the way in which it's off camber unsettles the car. There's hardly any opportunity for getting a run out of there, and then the short straight with DRS, which is useless, into turn 1. So perhaps there's a small tweak you could make with that to make it a little bit smoother and a little bit easier to get round and get a run. But I think that Formula One need to basically look at it and go, okay, this is Monaco. We've got enormous cars here. How do we make the race interesting? Throw in these little gimmicks potentially to make it a little bit more interesting. And for those that go, I don't want gimmicks in Formula One, we've got DRS. That's a gimmick. So why don't we have just something, a 2-stop mandatory pit stop, or something just to throw different tyre compounds, something to make it so that we actually have something to watch here. I think also, obviously, there's the conversation around the red flag and the rule there, but that's not specific to Monaco. But just there needs to be something tried. We're doing sprint races. That's a gimmick. And we've got 6 of those that, let's just have a shorter race on Saturday. Like there are things that Formula One are willing to do. And I think for people to tune into Monaco and actually be genuinely interested over 78 laps of what most people are calling a procession, have a bit of fun with it. Try something. I would hate to see Monaco be dropped from the calendar, because qualifying is the best session of the year, without a doubt. There is no more exciting thing to see than an onboard of a driver just to the absolute edge of their limits going around Monaco. But the race definitely needs something, for sure.
Can't have it all, can you? Saturday and Sunday both being entertaining. Bernie, when you were obviously working with a team, what was the feeling in the team about going to Monaco? Is it a race you actively look forward to? Because it obviously does have a lot of quirks and challenges, doesn't it?
It has a lot of quirks and challenges. I wouldn't say look forward to. It's a test. You feel more pressure at Monaco. It's very small, not for this race, but very small differences in pit stop lap, for example, have a really dramatic effect on your finishing position. Getting it slightly wrong, there's just no margin to recover it. So that brings more pressure. The logistics of being there, the garage, the setup of the pit wall, all of that is just not great. It's really trying on the teams, and that's most of the reason that you actually don't enjoy enjoy it as a race is just trying to get from A to B through all of the spectators and famouses and all this sort of stuff. You just feel like you're wrestling away with a laptop through lots of people with glasses of champagne. So it doesn't feel great from that side. But, and there are plenty of races in the year where you watch qualifying and yes, it's exciting, but it's not Monaco qualifying. And, then those races maybe have better races on Sunday. So for me, the entertainment comes from Saturday. If I'm to prioritise a session in Monaco, I will watch qualifying on Saturday. And that's partially one of the reasons why I don't think it should be split. There's a lot of talk of should qualify and be like the junior series in 2 different sessions, whatever. I don't think so. I love it as it is in one session. If we were to do, if someone said, "What we need something for tomorrow for Monaco, what are we going to do?" I just get rid of the reason of a second qualifying. Like do something, make it like do the 1 lap shootout type thing. That is the most interesting bit. Like it's always going to be difficult to overtake. For me, the problem is the weight of the cars, the size of the cars. We need to be, they don't represent what we have as a car. And there's been a lot of talk, even in the automotive industry, that the size of the cars that we're producing now are too big for our roads. We've all had that, can't park in the parking space because the cars are too wide, whatever it is. Like we need to reduce the size of everything. So we need to be pushing in that direction in order to get these cars more nimble. And, as a whole, we need to look at that, I think.
Yeah. And what about Bernie, the event itself? Because it is just, certainly on TV, it just is spectacular. It's the French Riviera. It's all those amazing things. It's normally the first time we see Europe in a Formula One season. It really elevates it, I think, from that perspective as well.
Yeah, it does. And, it's a beautiful part of the world. And, the setting with the harbour and the boats and everything is just, it's so abnormal to most of us. Our everyday life is so different to our everyday life, and that makes it really interesting to watch and to see. And even the circuit, and you really see, we have a lot of discussion about, is it the car, is it the strategist or whatever. Monaco is a driver's track, so you see the drivers pushing, you see the pressure that they're under. It doesn't come down to just someone on the pit wall with a load of numbers deciding what pit stop making a difference in the race or not. Okay, the race has question marks over it, but it was easy to understand. We've had many races where from the outside looking in with the strategy that's going on, it's very difficult to figure out what the hell's going on. So it's about that balance.
Yeah, and Matt, I guess with 24 races now in a calendar, this is the age-old question, isn't it? Yeah, Silverstones, Monzas, Spas, the traditional Formula One tracks. They're in my view, there's kind of room for everyone. You wouldn't want to have 24 Monacos, but you probably wouldn't want to have 24 Suzukas. Maybe you would. Maybe some people would argue that would be actually a really good championship. It probably would, to be fair. But is there not room for everything in that calendar?
Well, Stefano would say so. He'd probably say that let's throw a few more in. Let's get it to 30. So, there is room for Monaco. And, of course, everyone is going to complain because at the end of the day, they're watching a race and it was dull. There's no two ways about it. So I can understand the frustration. I think it's just a level of... We all know that Monaco is probably not going to produce an absolute worldie of a race. Unless we have a sprinkle of rain, everything is thrown up into the air. But... It's having that level of understanding, but this was probably one of the worst races I've ever seen. So I can understand the frustration, but that was purely down to the fact the one thing we had to look forward to in the race was taken away, and that was the pit stops. And then it was literally just a procession. So yeah, the one thing that we had to keep us on the edge of our seats somewhat wasn't there. So I can completely get why people have been quite negative about this one.
From a TV perspective, our audience figures at Sky were big. We're bigger than a lot of the recent races that we've had. So perhaps does just go to show that people still really, really do love Monaco. Bernie, one of the interesting questions that I guess that red flag threw up was the issue of changing tyres under a red flag. The fact that you, under the current rules, can do that. I think we said earlier, look, that's not just a thing for a red flag in Monaco. That's obviously the case across the whole season. Do you think that's something that needs to be looked at? If that wasn't available to the teams, how would it look different?
Yeah, so there's a lot of discussion. There's always been a lot of discussion about the red flag. We've had dare I bring it up, Abu Dhabi 2021 or whatever, the same discussion happens as well. So I see a lot of the logical reasons why we change tyres under red flag. If you think of this week, Joe went very slowly through all the debris at the end. got around to behind the red flag, if he's to start in those tyres, like that's a massive safety issue. And if you have a rule that says, okay, you under the red flag you don't change tyres, but you can change tyres if you have a puncture, then you get into the, okay, like how do we properly prove that we have a puncture? Now that might seem really simple to a lot of people, but actually these cars, these tyres, the pressures are quite low respective to your road car. So actually to tell statically that there's a puncture is very different to when the car's going flat out. You know, there's times that behind a safety car, we can't accurately tell that there's a puncture, but then when the car starts to go at full speed, it's obvious. So there's that issue. So then I started to think, well, okay, what if you can physically change tyres, but you have to be on the same compound? So if you're on a medium before, you're on a medium after. Now, that would work, except that in Monaco, people only had one medium and one hard. So they couldn't stay on the same compound. So again, that doesn't really work. There's many reasons. And I think the overriding safety thing of you needing to physically change the tyre under red flag will still exist. And I'm totally on board with that. Even simple things like coming in that slowly and going back out, it's not easy to get that right. Maybe we need to say that if you've only done the 1 or 2 laps that we've seen in Monaco and then there's a red flag, that doesn't count as your pit stop, and you still need to do another pit stop later on in the race. So whatever the case may be, that I think there are ways around it. Equally at Monaco, if we didn't have the hard tyre in Monaco and we only had the soft and the medium, then that red flag would have helped those that started on soft because they could have ran a medium to the end. But anyone that started on medium couldn't have ran to the end on a soft. So we would have had a much more interesting race. So having 3 compounds in Monaco, it's a bit of an outlier, but same at some other tracks as well, meant that both compounds could comfortably go to the end. And that's actually what took away our race, was the fact that it didn't matter what your start strategy had been. Both were able to make it. So there's loads of little things we can do, but I don't think we're going to get away from a safety side of not physically changing the tyres under a red flag.
So many factors. Matt, I can see you nodding your head. Do you agree with Bernie?
Yeah, so I have absolutely no problem with drivers being able to change tyres. That's fine. From a safety perspective, whatever, let them all do what they want. The problem I have is, why does it get rid of the mandatory pit stop? That's the part that I don't understand, why that part's in the rules. I get everything else, because of course, from a sporting perspective, that then takes away a pit stop for a lot of people, especially in this era of Formula One where we have 1 stops almost every single week. So for me, just get rid of the mandatory side, let everyone do what they want, and then it will kind of settle that, I believe. So yeah, that's the change I would make, and it would have made at least Monaco a little bit more interesting. And perhaps they want to put it in that if it's in the first 10 laps or whatever. But I would just say, look, it doesn't count as your mandatory pit stop. Oh no, you've not gained from this because you'll still have to pit again. But that's Formula One. We have lots of different factors that can affect people's races, and I think this is another one that does need tweaking.
And we've had some really exciting red flags recently, if that's not a contradiction in terms, where actually it's completely reset the grid, or it's really like burst into life a race in lap 50 or lap 55, whatever, if with more laps to go. So yeah, I think there's definitely a case for keeping the changing of tyres. Right, just one more story really to wrap up before we go, and that's the Ocon story. after Canada, Matt's raising his eyebrows. This is trying to summarise what happened. So Alpine boss Bruno Famin said there will be consequences after Esteban Ocon collided with teammate Pierre Gasly in the opening lap of the Monaco Grand Prix. We understand, Sky Sports News understands, that it's under serious consideration. Famin said we're going to have to make a tough decision. But Bernie, this would be highly unusual, wouldn't it, to see a team do this to a driver? It's a very public dressing down of a driver's actions.
Yeah, it is. And so immediately the strategist in me went to thinking when the story started to emerge, went to thinking in my head, which race would I rather take a 10 place grid penalty? Is it Canada or Barcelona? Or not 10-5. He is going to have to take that whatever race he rejoins. The regulation is that that driver's next race, it's not the team's next race. So he will have to take it. So, is there something to be played there in terms, but it's pretty harsh, but the back of the grid is brutal. And when you look at how the race finished out, Gasly got 1 point for the team. That's half of their points for the year. That moves them off the bottom of the championship. They're tied with Williams now. The points at the back of the field, particularly for those 4 teams at the back, are very difficult to come by. And those points will make a massive difference at the end of the year. And this was close to, one of our first rules is do not hit your teammate, And we've seen so many examples over the years of where that happens. We've had Red Bull crashing in Baku. We've had, in my time, the Force India's racing points, very keen to crash into each other as well. But it's absolutely, at that back of the field, points are so, so valuable. So I get it. But this can't have been the first discussion that's happened about it. There must have been more stuff going on in the background before we've got to this point. But I understand the reasoning, but it probably would be pretty harsh.
Contract runs out, Matt, doesn't it, at the end of this year? It's quite a strong move from Esteban to be doing something like that on the opening lap of Monaco at that point in the track.
Especially when apparently he was told not to, and there were team orders, and he shouldn't have done that. So it was, the actual incident itself, very strange for Ocon to have done that. We saw that Miami, that was the greatest side-by-side action I've ever seen in Formula One. I don't know how they got through that sector, going side-by-side through all of that, very tight and twisty corners. I think they used their token of luck there, and Ocon was like, we can do it every week, and then clearly not. So I can't see this happening. From many perspectives, as Bernie mentions, Alpine are fighting for their lives, just trying to get off the bottom of the constructors pretty much. But also contractually, so is there something in his contract that if you crash into your teammate, you might be binned off for a race? It must be a breach of contract if they do actually bin him off. And that will cost millions. So for me, from that side as well, it doesn't really make too much sense. So yes, I think Esteban would have had a stern talking to. I think Bruno Faman has obviously, steam's been coming out of his ears when he's seen his 2 drivers come together. Whether he should have publicly said that, I'm not sure, because now Alpine will look like they've backed down if they don't give him any consequences. So from that side and an image perspective of the team, it's not going to look great if they don't follow through with such massive words to say, your team principal always says and backs your drivers no matter what. To say that publicly was a massive statement. So they've got a decision to make, but I can't see them. Ocon's a great driver. Gasly and Ocon are a great driver pairing. They just don't work together too well as a teammate pairing. So, I don't think anything will change for Canada, but let's see.
Yeah, I forgot about the Miami incident, actually. Yeah, it's almost been brewing maybe for a little while. Bernie, do you think, do you expect Esteban to be on the grid for Canada?
I'd be surprised if they bench him for Canada. I think I sort of agree with Matt that you want your best possible option of getting points from both drivers in the day, and they have a good driver pairing. The ideal thing that you want in a team like that is if one driver's not pick up the points, the other driver's right there. And actually the drivers have been pretty close in qualifying and racing, and too close, But that is the way that team's going to best score points. But they need to be pulling together, both in car development, in supporting each other. We've seen, Haas this year, when you look at the points, are way ahead in the points because those 2 guys have been working pretty well together. We had the incident earlier on in the year where Kevin was holding up traffic for Hülkenberg. That sort of teamwork is what's going to get the points. And so they need to be together on it, and it doesn't seem like they are at the minute.
Points mean literally prize money, don't they, in Formula One? And that's obviously crucial the further down you are. Just time to tell you about what's coming up on Sky Sports F1. So we've got a weekend off this weekend, and then we're going to head to Montreal in Canada the week after next. You can catch every session between the 7th and 9th of June before Sunday's race at 7 p.m. Bernie, Matt, thank you so much for your time. Excited for Canada? It's going to be a good one, I think, isn't it? We're going to finally see. It's going to be the race that we're going to see who's closest.
Canada's always a good race, and it's very, very different to Monaco, so it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah,
and I think Ferrari will be quick again, so delusion levels at an all-time high.
Yes, the level of optimism on this podcast, I'm here for it. I think it's been brilliant. Let's hope we don't. Let's hope we stay that way throughout the season. Thanks for your time, both of you. We'll be back next Tuesday to build up to the Canadian Grand Prix. Hope you can join us then. Bye for now.